Julian Blake stood in the glass-paneled boardroom of Blake Enterprises, the morning sun gleaming off the Manhattan skyline like shards of broken diamonds. From the 60th floor, the city looked quiet, almost tame. But inside Julian's chest, the opposite reigned, an unrest he hadn't felt in years. His fingers were clenched behind his back, jaw set, gaze locked on the horizon. Behind him, the door opened with a quiet click. He didn't turn. She RSVP'd, came the familiar voice of Carla, his assistant. She stood carefully, like someone who knew just how volatile silence could be. Julian's eyes didn't move. Who? Carla hesitated. Madeline Crane. There was a flicker in Julian's posture, a tiny break in the stiffness of his shoulders. He slowly turned his head toward her. She's coming to the gala? Yes, Carla confirmed, stepping forward and holding out a sleek silver tablet. Confirmed just now, she'll be attending with Prince Eric of Hanover. Julian's expression remained unreadable, but the pause was enough to say everything. Madeline, she hadn't just broken his heart, she'd humiliated him, called him emotionally stunted, incapable of genuine affection, then left him for royalty. It had taken him months to repair the cracks in his pride, let alone his image. She won't pity me, he said coldly, returning his gaze to the skyline. No, one will, Carla replied a bit too quickly. I need a date. I'll arrange someone. No, I don't need arm candy. I need a girlfriend, someone convincing, someone the press will believe I've been seeing for a year, someone Madeline will believe I love. Carla stared. You want a fake relationship? Julian turned fully now, steel in his tone. A believable one. With backstory, with social proof, with chemistry. Find someone who can sell the fantasy. Carla nodded, already tapping notes into her tablet. Any preferences? Yes. She can't be a model or an actress. Too obvious. I want real, but polished, smart, warm. Someone who's not impressed by my money. Carla raised an eyebrow. That narrows it down. Good, Julian said, walking past her and out of the boardroom. Make it happen. Across the city, Claire Jennings was pushing through the revolving door of the Book Nook, her favorite little haven of literature, and unfortunately, her very underpaying part-time job. She wore scuffed boots, a corduroy jacket too thin for the weather, and a tote bag that might have once been white. Inside, the manager looked up from the register with a sigh. Claire, you're late. I know, she puffed, removing her scarf. The C train stalled at West 4th again. That's the third time this month, he interrupted. You're lucky we're short-staffed. She offered him a peace-offering smile and slid behind the counter where a pile of new releases waited to be shelved. Her fingers brushed over the titles absent-mindedly as her mind drifted. This wasn't what she pictured when she moved to New York. A literature major with big dreams, she thought she'd be editing manuscripts by now, or at least working in publishing. Instead, she lived in a 6th-floor walk-up and had cereal for dinner. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She fished it out, expecting her roommate or maybe a spam caller, but froze when she saw the message banner, Social Authenticity, Inc. New role opportunity. High-profile client, 1-week girlfriend contract, $15,000. Reply yes for details, she blinked. She'd signed up for the agency as a joke last fall, some modern version of gig acting where lonely businessmen hired people to play pretend. She'd never been offered a real job before. $15,000. She glanced around. The bookstore smelled like must and disappointment. Her thumb hovered, then tapped yes. The next morning, Claire found herself walking into a luxury suite at the Mercer Hotel, heart pounding. She wore her only nice dress, a navy wrap number that made her feel less like a broke girl from Iowa and more like someone who could maybe pull this off. A woman in a severe black suit greeted her. Claire Jennings, she asked briskly. Yes, follow me. They passed through a hallway lined with abstract art and into a spacious living room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The city looked far away up here, removed, unreachable. And then Julian Blake walked into the room. Claire's breath caught. He was taller than she'd imagined, handsome in that intimidating way only people with power seemed to master. Sharp cheekbones, clean-shaven jaw, eyes like storm glass. He didn't smile. "So," he said, looking her over, "you're the one they sent." She nodded, trying not to fidget. "You're Julian Blake." He walked toward her, hands in his pockets. "You know who I am." Everyone does. He didn't react to the compliment. Instead, he gestured to a sleek binder on the table. "Everything's in there, contract, NDA, background story. You'll be paid half now, half later. In return, you'll be my girlfriend for 1 week. We've been together for a year, publicly. Privately, you're in love with me. Not too clingy, not too cold. I'll text you daily. I'll know your schedule. We'll do interviews, maybe a photo op. You'll attend the gala. Questions?" Claire blinked at the avalanche of information. "Do I get a safe word?" Julian's eyes flicked toward her, surprised. "What?" "Just wondering how serious this hostage situation is," she said dryly. A flicker of something, amusement, touched his mouth. "You'll do." The next few days moved at a dizzying pace. Claire was given a crash course in her new identity. A well-read non-profit founder, born in Vermont, passionate about urban literacy programs. She had a fake dog named Pippa, a meet-cute story involving red wine at a charity auction, and an expertly curated Instagram account filled with fake couple shots. Photoshopped images of her and Julian picnicking, holding hands in Central Park, sipping coffee in bed. She had fittings for gowns, media coaching, and etiquette lessons. Claire tried to absorb it all, but every now and then she'd catch Julian watching her during fittings or rehearsals, studying her, measuring something. The day before the gala, she found herself in his penthouse, practicing how to say, "I love you," without sounding awkward. "I feel like I'm in a high-budget improv class," she muttered, flopping onto his velvet couch. Julian, seated across from her, raised a brow. "Do you always complain this much?" "Only when I'm being paid 15 grand to fake affection for a billionaire." He looked at her for a moment, then said, "What do you do when you're not pretending to be someone else?" "I shelve books, dream about publishing a novel, avoid my student loan emails." He was quiet. "You're not like the women I usually date. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." He smiled, just a little. She grinned back. The night of the gala arrived with all the tension of a Broadway premiere. Claire wore a sapphire blue gown that shimmered like waves under moonlight. Her hair was swept into soft curls, and Julian, in a black tuxedo, looked like he belonged on the cover of Forbes meets GQ. They stepped out of the limousine and into a wall of cameras and light. Paparazzi shouted their names. Julian wrapped his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him, smiling like she meant it. Inside the ballroom, the world shimmered. Crystal chandeliers hung like upside-down castles, and guests floated through. The golden haze like royalty. Then Claire saw her, Madeline. She was tall, poised, wrapped in a silver gown that clung like a secret. A man with slick blonde hair and 2 white teeth stood beside her. Prince Erich. Julian's hand tightened on Claire's waist. Madeline approached. "Julian, it's been a long time." Claire didn't flinch. "We were just talking about you," she said with a fake warmth. "He said I make him forget all his old mistakes." Julian choked on a laugh. Madeline blinked, then smiled stiffly and walked away. After that, the night was smooth sailing. They danced, mingled, and even laughed for real. Julian whispered things in her ear that made her giggle, inside jokes, subtle flirtations, as if he enjoyed this game more than he'd ever admit. They left after midnight, hand in hand, and walked. A stretch of Central Park lit only by distant traffic lights. "You were amazing," Julian said quietly. "So were you." He stopped under a lamppost. The air was crisp, full of late spring promise. "Claire," he began, "do you ever wonder if people like us, me with all this money, and you with your reality, do you think we can actually fall in love?" Or are we just pretending for so long? We forget how to know the difference. She looked up at him. I think sometimes pretending teaches you how it's supposed to feel. And sometimes you realize you weren't pretending at all. He stepped closer. I don't want this to end when the contract does. She didn't answer. Instead, she kissed him. It was quiet, real, and full of things she didn't have words for yet. The week passed. Their chemistry was too natural to be faked. He brought her coffee without asking. She smoothed his tie without thinking. They slept side by side, at first because it was easier for appearances, and then because they didn't want to be apart. But time ran out. The contract ended. Claire stood in his penthouse, suitcase in hand, unsure of what came next. This wasn't supposed to be real, she whispered. Julian stepped forward. It was. Maybe not at first, but I've never looked at someone the way I look at you. I'm scared. So am I. They stood in silence. Then he said, let's start over. No lies, no pretending, just us. She dropped the suitcase and ran into his arms. 1 year later, they still laughed about it, the most expensive first date in New York history. They were in pajamas, watching old movies, when Julian leaned over and whispered, still the best mistake I ever made. And Claire smiled because this time there really was no pretending.